So if you Google the kind of Google search images of the binding of Isaac, you'll see that the vast majority of artists through the centuries have portrayed portrayed Isaac, as you see here, as a young man. And the reason is that the chronology of Sarah's life makes it clear that Isaac was older than 5 and younger than 37. Okay, so somewhere within that range. It's unknowable exactly how old, but there's reason to believe that he was at the very least a teenager, from the fact that he was strong enough to carry the wood for the sacrifice up the mountain, where Abraham loads the wood on Isaac. And the reason that Isaac's age is significant is that it indicates that Isaac gave himself up willingly. Okay, he allowed Abraham to bind him, to tie him up and place him on the altar. Okay, so he certainly had the strength. If he had the strength to carry the wood up, he had the strength to resist Abraham, who was well over 100 years old at this point. And he had the speed, to escape him if he wanted to. Okay, so it shows that Isaac submitted to Abraham in binding him to the altar. Okay, so this story features Abraham's submission to God, but it also shows Isaac's submission to his father. Okay. Abraham's submission is more accurately characterized as trust in God's designs. Okay, so the question, when you look at Isaac's submission to Abraham, is could this be the case here too? Could this be the case? Could this be true also of Isaac's submission? Could it have been trust in his father's good judgment? Again, just a question to contemplate. And then one more word about Abraham before we turn to Hagar and, well, to the next episode, which is Isaac and Jacob. So there's a motif in the Bible by which the acts of the fathers foreshadow the acts of the sons or of their descendants. Okay, in Hebrew it's called Maaseh Avot Siman Banim. Okay, basically like father, like son. Okay, the father's actions indicate what the son or the descendant will do. I guess you saw part of that with the curse of Canaan. You know, Ham's sin and what will happen later on. But in the Abraham story, Abraham reaches Canaan, then he leaves Canaan for Egypt because of a drought, just as we'll see Jacob's family doing later on. And we'll see the Israelites doing later still. And Abraham, in the Abraham story, Abraham is subject to Pharaoh's rule, and then he leaves Egypt with great wealth, again, just like the Israelites will do in the Exodus. And he returns to Canaan through specific locations that the Israelites will later pass through in their own departure from Egypt. Also, Abraham conquers specific locations in Canaan in the War of the Four Kings, which later, after the Exodus, under Joshua, these places that are mentioned in the Abraham story will outline the borders of the Israelite settlement in Canaan. Okay, so you see here, so the Abraham story introduces certain locations, certain dramatic elements, which will later be replayed in the national story of the Israelites, in going down to Egypt, coming back from Egypt, going through the desert, conquering the land again, and settling within these within the territory captured by their ancestral father, Abraham. Okay, so for next week, please, as we said, revisit the Hagar story, which is Genesis 16 and Genesis 21, and then read about Isaac and his distinctive wife, Rebecca, in Genesis 24 to Genesis 28, verse 9. Okay. And see if you can see any clues from the Isaac story about Sarah's role in the binding of Isaac scene. And also, please see if you can identify in the Jacob story, or actually all these characters. See if you can identify the character traits that the biblical author paints for us for Isaac, Rebecca, Esau, and Jacob. And really just write them down, characterize these four characters in a word or two each, as according to the impression that you get from the biblical author. And yeah, just bring that note to our next meeting. Okay. Till then, bye-bye.